Morning. Thank you all for joining us for this discussion for our Advocacy Cafe. The topic for today is going to be language access services in New Mexico state courts. We are live on Facebook, and we really want to share this information with our community. So please ask any questions or any comments in the comment box on Facebook. And for those of you joining us on Zoom, please also ask your questions in the chat and the Q&A. This is a webinar, and so you're only able to see the panelists, but please interact with us in the chat. We are grateful to have Bernice Ramos, who is the Language Access Senior Statewide Program Manager for the New Mexico Administration. And we are also joined by Patricia M. Galindo. She is a supervising attorney with the Administrative Office of the Courts, Legal Services. We are grateful for you all being here with us today. And if you are on Facebook, please click that share button if you think it might be beneficial to share with your community. There will be a survey and a certificate at the end of this training. As always, you will get an email from me. And so with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to your panelists this morning, and please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat as well. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Patricia and Bernice, for being here with us today.
Great, thank you so much for that great introduction, and hello to everyone virtually. I always think it's difficult when we can't see you, but I can see that we have quite a few participants joining us. And just to give you guys a little overview of who we are, so Bernice and I both work for the Administrative Office of the Courts. For those of you that aren't familiar with our office really is the umbrella supportive agency that works for all state courts in New Mexico. What that means is that we work with the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, the District Courts, Metropolitan Court in Albuquerque, and our magistrate court systems. So we are able to work with all of our state court systems throughout New Mexico. So we are both very fortunate. Part of my background, as some of you may know me already, is I've been with the AOC for, about 8.5 years. And originally I was hired under a Violence Against Women Act, a VAWA grant. And part of my responsibilities at that time was to do domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and those things. I have still continued to do that type of work. So what we do in our legal services office is I don't get directly involved with cases, but what I do look at is systemic and policy issues for our state court systems with these subject areas. So everybody kind of looks at me and goes, what does that mean? In a nutshell, what I try to do is look to make sure that the policies and procedures that the state courts, the AOC has in place, especially for our domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking victims, are such that we have equal access to justice. That means that any victim that comes to the courthouse steps in any court in New Mexico is able to access services that they need in an appropriate manner and is able to get the same types of services, access to justices. Whether you need an order of protection, you get information. So we try to create policies and procedures so that no matter where you live in New Mexico, you're afforded the same access to justice. And that's kind of our tagline that we like to use. So I hope I didn't use too much legalese for you all, but that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. So what I think the coalition, we reached out to them before and we've talked about this, is I'm very proud of our language access services. So I am the staff attorney, but Bernice runs the language access services, and most people don't realize what a great asset we have here in New Mexico. So for example, our language access services has consistently, and this year we are ranked #1 in the country. That means that we are doing innovative things. We have more resources available to our communities than most state courts do. And really, other states look at us as to setting the bar, and we have lots of great initiatives and programs and services that we believe maybe not everyone in our community knows about. So that's kind of the highlight of our presentation today. And we're very excited to go ahead and share that information. So I think what we've talked about is Bernice, being the head of language access, and I'll turn it over to her in a second, was going to walk us through several of those different services and the different things. We have a lot of stuff available on our website. So Bernice is going to walk you through so you can see where to find those. As we go through each subject, I think feel free to ask questions. And so questions about policies and procedures, anything that we can do to answer that. And then before we end, in case I don't have a chance, if you ever have a question about policies and procedures, again, I can't talk to anybody about your direct case, but if you're seeing in your community there's something that's happening or you want to talk about just general things, please feel free to reach out to me at the Administrative Office of the Courts. That's what my job is. I'm kind of that bridge to kind of help explain the law, try to explain if there's anything that maybe you or one of your victims doesn't know about, and see if we can educate our community about that process. So that's what we're here for today. So I'm going to go ahead then and turn it over to Bernice, who's going to go ahead and guide you through her whole PowerPoint presentation of amazing services that we have available here in the New Mexico court system.
Thank you, Patricia and Teresa, and thank you all for inviting me. Patricia summarized everything that we do at the Administrative Office of the Courts. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you all, and just give me a minute. It takes a little bit to get it going. Let's see. Got it going? Okay. So we are the New Mexico Language Access Services. I hope this doesn't cover that much. So as a result of this session, I'm hoping that you all will be able to explain how federal law requires the courts to provide language access services and make reasonable accommodations for court participants. You'll be able to identify common barriers for limited English proficiency. We often refer to them as LEPs, to access the courts and how to improve access and services. You'll be able to identify resources available to domestic violence victims and navigate to the New Mexico courts and New Mexico language access website. Our legal overview, and Patricia may join in and explain some of these to you, but it's about due process. So what governs language access is the Fifth Amendment, the right to a fair trial; Sixth Amendment, right to confront adverse witnesses; the 14th Amendment, which is equal protection of the laws to all. Within our program, we have the Title II, the ADA, the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, the Executive Order 13166, the DOJ policy, which provides equal access at all points of contact, New Mexico statutes, the Deaf Interpreter Act and the Court Interpreter Act, the New Mexico Constitution, which is the right to an interpreter and LEP individual to serve as jurors. We're the only state in the nation that provides for LEP jurors to serve on our juries, and also our Supreme Court rules. A little bit more about language access services. The Administrative Office of the Courts manages and funds all language access related activities. These are inside and outside the courtroom. For any court-ordered services, we provide language access for civil and criminal proceedings, our LEP jurors, and we also provide translation services. The circumstances in which an interpreter is provided for the courts is it's the provision of spoken language and sign language interpreters in court proceedings is based in New Mexico state statute and the Constitution. In New Mexico's courts, interpreters will be provided consistent with the court interpreter standards of practice and payment policies at no cost to court customers, witnesses, jurors, and other parties who need such assistance under the following circumstances. The first one is for a deaf or hard of hearing litigant, juror, observer, when the observer has submitted a request to the court prior to the proceeding, or witness in any type of court proceeding under Title II of the ADA, which requires local and state courts to provide qualified sign language interpreters or other accommodations to ensure effective communication with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. For a non-English speaking person who is a principal party in interest or a witness in a criminal case. For a non-English speaking person who is a principal party in interest or a witness in domestic violence cases, domestic relations cases, and or children's court cases, including court-ordered domestic relations mediation. We also provide services for a non-speaking English person who is a principal party of interest in a civil case or that party's witness. For victims who are active case participants, example, testifying as a witness or when making a statement at sentencing. And we also provide services for any non-English speaking juror. And a court-certified interpreter will be provided to petit and grand juries, including jury orientation, voir dire, deliberations, and all portions of the trial. What we don't do is it's the responsibility of a private attorney, a public defender, or even the district attorney to provide qualified interpreters and translation services for witness interviews, pretrial transcriptions and translations, and attorney-client communication during the proceedings. So what is—
And Bernice, if I could just interject there really quickly, we can go back to the other slide. I think that this is really important. This is one of the questions that I get often as a lawyer. You talk about the public defender, private attorneys, or DA. So anything that has to do outside of the court system. So like examples of this would be witness interviews, like if there's a criminal case going on, that is not services that are provided by the courts. That's the DA's office that needs to be able to provide interpreters or translators or something at those hearings. For service providers, Bernice, a lot of our individuals, I believe, that belong to a coalition, these are entities that are providing services to victims. So one question that comes up often is your agency still should have, whether you use your language lines or interpreters, whatever services you have available, that is still the responsibility of all of your agencies, because that's something that's happening outside of the court system. So, you know, that's always coming up to us, or at least one of the questions. But once the victim comes, remember I talked about walking up the courthouse steps, once that person enters our court system, then if there's nobody with them that is able to interpret for them, or if they prefer to have somebody else, that's when the court would then be required to provide them with the language access services. So just wanted to walk that through with everyone, because I do think that that's a little confusing. Law enforcement also, in part of their duties, are required, it's their responsibility to have language access services. So although we're all criminal justice kind of system players, each entity on its own, when an individual has access or is accessing services with that entity, so law enforcement, so it's the DA's office, it could be any of that kind of things, everyone's required to do that on our own. But once you enter the court for actual court functions, then that's when these services would take place. So I don't know if we have any questions on that, Bernice, but that's one of the things I just wanted to clarify for everybody and give them very specific details on. I'm looking at our chat box. Let's see here. I do think there is one. Under the chat, we have the coalition has a contract with the language line to provide services to victims. This is available for use by non-governmental victim service providers. If you have questions about how to access this, you can contact Teresa Armendariz at the coalition. So that's the comment that we have on here. And I just wanted to make that part really clear to all of our viewers today.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Patricia. Let's see. Okay, so and so that actually leads us right into what does it mean, language access services at all points of contact. So when we say outside the courtroom, it's actually within the court building. So we have court employees who are have been certified as language access specialists, and they have direct communication. Usually these are customers at the window, customers who call on the telephone. So those are direct communication with LEPs. We also interpret for communications between the LEPs and the court staff. In our magistrate courts, and also our municipal courts, we can use our language access specialists for traffic court. And those are non-jailable offenses, usually magistrate metro only. We have the CLI, and that's very similar to what Patricia talked about. It's an 800 number that court staff is able to call, and those would be for languages, usually other than Spanish, but we don't have anybody locally certified. And then we have our bilingual staff. Inside the courtroom, we use certified court interpreters, and those are in person, by phone, or by video. We have justice system interpreters, and those are also used for in person, by phone, or video. But our justice system interpreters cannot interpret in jury trials or for jurors. Our language access specialists do traffic court, mag and metro courts, non-jailable offenses. We also have the deaf and hard of hearing litigants. And so we always have to keep in mind when we're dealing with our ASL population that ASL is visual and accommodations are on a case-by-case basis. Usually when we deal with our deaf population, we ask them what method of communication do they prefer. And we do not use family members or person who know some sign language to interpret. It's very important that we utilize certified court interpreters, even for ASL communication. We also have our Native American community and our litigants. We face linguistic challenges with, because the Native American languages are descriptive, there's usually no one-to-one equivalent for legal terms, and there's a lack of familiarity with legal rights. We also have to keep in mind the cultural traits are often frequently misinterpreted, such as eye contact and body language, tone and volume, and even storytelling. So we do utilize our language access specialists who are certified in Navajo, as well as our certified Navajo interpreters. So I'm going to get into navigating through the New Mexico courts website. So what it is, it's nmcourts.gov. And so there's usually a band up at the top. And what I'm going to focus on is the self-help. And if you go down, we'll look at the domestic violence. But as you see, there's many categories in which you can click, but we'll focus on the domestic violence today. So once you click on the domestic violence, you'll get to the home page. And so you'll see home, and I put 2 arrows, and we'll expand a little bit. Within the home, you can scroll down to the very bottom, and at the bottom of the page are some links. And these are actual videos, very nice videos, both in English and Spanish. They're YouTube, and they talk about obtaining an order of protection. Sometimes people use the terms order of protection or restraining order interchangeably, but with domestic violence, it's an order of protection. If we go back to, there's a question. If we go back to the home page where I was at, there's a drop-down menu on the orders of protection, and there's an overview. So what that overview does is I gave you a little snippet. It gives us the definitions of domestic abuse. The next drop-down menu is the FAQs. So within the FAQs, there's several topics. What's an order of protection? Where can I get an order of protection? And it goes down. If you click on the little plus signs at the end, there's more information that's expanded. So the one I clicked on is, where can I get an order of protection? And so when you click on it, it says an order of protection is issued by a district court. You can find the locations of all district courts in New Mexico here. State courts maps, that's a hyperlink. You click on that and it'll get you to the court in your district. If we come back up to the self-help on that original page on the NM courts, there's also forms. We've been up at domestic violence. Now we've dropped down to a couple more down to forms. Here we have all sorts of forms. I'm going to focus on the district court forms. That's where you'd find any forms you need for orders of protection, domestic violence. So once you click on the district court forms, you can choose which types. Again, there's the landlord-tenant, the mobile home park, criminal, domestic relations, domestic violence, and children's court. Many times, people who need domestic violence forms also need domestic relations forms. So you'll find them fairly close together. If you were to click on the domestic violence forms, then you get the list of forms. And I just gave a little snapshot, but there's your petition for order of protection from domestic abuse, service of process, and they're all numbered. Up at the top are bilingual forms. So if we were to click on the bilingual forms, we have the same forms in English and Spanish, and let me go back to the other slide. They coincide with the same numbers that are in English. 4961 is the petition for order of protection from domestic abuse, and 4961A. And so what I thought I'd do is I click on it, and the forms are bilingual and can be filled out in Spanish and turned into the court in Spanish. Then the court submits the document for translation. and I wanted to do there's a
Bernice,
better
I have a quick question.
Sure.
As you were on the page of like the forms and what they are and the numbers, is there any way that maybe it can be updated where like the information can be translated in Spanish? Because I saw a lot of the forms in the bilingual section just stated bilingual, bilingual, bilingual. So do you think it might be helpful to provide some information like titles in Spanish so they know what forms are what forms?
We definitely can do that. Thank you for that. Yes. And so this next one I have, it shows, you know, it's in English, service of process for petition for order of protection and domestic violence. So it's in English, and then right under it, and it's italicized, it's in Spanish. So they're truly bilingual forms where it has both English and Spanish. But the courts do accept the forms in Spanish, filled out, and then the courts will have them translated into English. Most of the courts, when we do have a translation and orders are generated, the judges or hearing officers are really good about having it translated the other way. So the orders will be issued in English, and we will have them translated in Spanish or the language we need so that the litigants can read the documentation. What I have here is our language access staff. So there's my name. We also have Peggy Cadwell, who she is the statewide ADA coordinator. She focuses on Title II. We have Margarita Raicia Johnson, and she is the statewide language access coordinator. And Josh Kahawe, he is also a program manager with language access. So I'd be happy to share this PowerPoint presentation with you, Teresa. I tried to just focus on the language access portion of the website, and specifically the domestic violence. But I will definitely look at updating the website so that the numbers do have it, maybe bilingual, English and Spanish.
Right, and if I could just interject though, Bernice, too, and Teresa, what's really nice, I think, about the New Mexico Judiciary's website is, and if you go back to the first page, we do have a fully Spanish inclusive site. So what's nice is if when you go into any of our sub pages in the judiciary, on the left-hand side, you know, is what we call the navigator. At the top of every page, we have Español listed specifically. And so what's very nice about that, and it's good always to make that readily accessible, but what would happen is if you're searching on there right away, when you look at the navigation, you would click Español, and what we have that's very nice is we have mirrored images. So everything that's available in English, when you click the Español, the Spanish click, everything is listed there fully immersive in Spanish. So it's for everything that you can find in all of them. So I think that that's kind of nice to have that a lot of state courts don't have. You know, some state courts rely on Google Translate or something like that, but we're able to have mirrored images. So if there was somebody that needed Spanish services, they should be able to see the Español tab pretty clear throughout most of our pages. And when you click there, it just takes you to that. And then when you look at that, you can see all of those things that are there. You know, the other thing that's happened that I think is great, and this is me as a lawyer, you know, most state courts do not allow people to file, they're called pleadings. So any kind of official court paperwork in any language other than English. And in the New Mexico Judiciary, I'm really excited to say over the last many years, we have piloted this program, and so much so that the Supreme Court has actually issued a rule in New Mexico that allows, in particular, DV and domestic relations cases for anybody, you know, we call them litigants, anybody that's involved in the case, that's another legal term, to be able to file paperwork in other languages. In New Mexico, traditionally, most of our language requests, of course, because of our population, is Spanish, but that just isn't only you know, narrowly to Spanish. The only fully bilingual forms we have, Bernice, if I'm not incorrect, is Spanish. So fully bilingual, English and Spanish on the same page. And what's nice about that is I do know that some agencies have translated their own forms, or maybe they have their advocates that ask it in Spanish and they write the answers in English. But what happens is if you don't use the bilingual forms that we have available, then maybe the person you're trying to help, when they go home, if it's all filled out in English, they don't realize what you wrote. and maybe you got something wrong. Or if you're helping somebody and they're the respondent in a DV case and everything's in English, but everybody knows that that person only speaks Spanish, it'd be really nice to fill that out in the bilingual format, because everybody that's involved in that case is able to see it, and then it's able to be translated for the judges. So I know that's a lot of detail, but I think that's a huge key component to make sure that everybody that's involved in these cases, and most of these people are what we call pro se, right? They don't have an attorney. Our new term in the judiciary, maybe you guys can learn this, we don't use pro se very much anymore. We use SRL, and that stands for self-represented litigant. So we call them SRLs a lot. So anybody that's representing themselves as an attorney, you should be able to get access to these forms, submit them, have them translated, have all that happen. And so all that is at the front end of a case. And it also, you know, Bernie said it's for these domestic relations cases. So for people that have custody issues and they have to file a custody case, we have that. We also have a lot of stuff available for our landlord tenant, especially that we all know this foreclosure has been happening. We also have the stay on people being able to be evicted. We have a lot of resources and information for people on that in Spanish in particular and other languages. So for those of you that are helping and do wraparound services, that's all there for you. So you know, we're kind of excited about that. I like to toot their horn at Language Access because it seems like common sense, but most states don't have that. So while it's common sense, we're the best state in the country to provide those services to everybody. So we're really excited about that.
I also, if you get on the website and you click up at the top ribbon, you know, I showed you the self-help, but go down a couple more and it's language access. Once you click on that, you'll meet Clara, our avatar. And so as soon as you click on language access, Clara, our avatar, comes up and she asks how she can assist you. And so she asks if you need assistance. You click yes, and she will let you know, she can assist you with that. So we're very proud of Clara.
Bernice, can you share your screen? I'm not sure if it works on this platform. I love Clara. I think that until people see what it looks like, Clara is really important for our website. And then Bernice, we have some kiosks. I know we have one in Santa Fe at the district court. Do we have any other kiosks where Clara is there that can help people?
We have a kiosk at the Santa Fe District Court, Taos District Court, and Roswell. And so Roswell and Taos, their courts are combined, the district and magistrate. But it's very useful. If you're in Santa Fe, you say you walk in the courthouse and you don't know where your courtroom is, it'll direct you to your courtroom. If you need forms, you can choose, you go through the menu, pick your forms, and you can choose to have them printed at the clerk's office, or you can have them emailed to you at home. So yeah, we customize Clara, our kiosk. So let me share my screen. Let me close some of this off.
You know, as we're talking about language access, maybe we can do this training also in Spanish and host it again, just in case for accessibility. But it's really nice to learn about all the, ways that you're supporting, those that are representing themselves in the court with a different language. So thank you.
So Bernice, I think you're muted.
You are.
Okay, let's see if I can share my screen. Just a minute.
And just looking at the screen that you've shared, it looks like you all have also to make the letters larger. And I did see the Espanol up top. We at the coalition, I placed it in the chat if that might be of interest. We use Recite Me, which also reads out the information that's on our website, can make the letters larger, can change the language on the website to any language that you all or anybody may need in our community. So that's also a really great program.
Are you able to see the NM Courts website?
Yes.
Okay, actually I'm on the inside. I don't want to be on the inside. Okay, did it switch over?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm on the language access right here. And let's see if Clara pops up. There she is.
Oh, okay.
I want to.
So Bernice, the only thing I'm struggling with is I can see it, and I hope everyone can see it. We can't quite hear what Clara's saying. So what's happening when Bernice is clicking on this is we have what's called an avatar, right? Which is our Clara, our avatar. She comes on and she's also like speaking, and it's you know, she's able to respond to what Bernice is clicking on. So she asks different questions. And so that's what's really nice about that. And then Bernice was just showing us at the top there, you were showing us where it says Espanol, and we have Dene on there, which I hadn't actually seen before. There we go. See how you can click on that. And so if you click on these sites, see how it goes into a fully immersive, and then Clara too also shows up in that language. So if we could, that's in Dene, which is Navajo, and then let's kick Espanol, excuse me, which is what's very, very nice. And see how everything, it's a fully immersive Spanish site, including what she's asking you. So it's also in a written format and in an audible format, which I think is really nice. And right here, Clara is asking everybody, what do you need help with? And this, I think, is also very useful for individuals that don't know how to find stuff on a website. They don't really understand. And so this is a great, huge project that we've done with the AOC that is not cheap, as you can imagine, but really allows our SRLs, our self-represented litigants, to be able to search our site. And now, even like we said, now that more people are going to the courthouse, we launched it before COVID. When they come into the courthouse, I've seen the one in Santa Fe. You walk in, it's a huge, like a big monitor, and you sit there, you press the button, and you're able to find out all that information. Especially for people that maybe are limited English proficient. That means that you maybe don't read very well. What's nice about our avatars, you click it and you're able to hear. So if you have low English proficiency or any other proficiency, like in Spanish, if you can't read the language well, being able to hear like where you're going, do you need help with finding where your courtroom is, or do you need forms? Why are you here? It's able to navigate people in person at those pilot sites, and then on site on our court website as well. So Bernice, thanks for sharing that. I think that that's really important for people to see. So do we have any questions about our avatar, Clara, or anything that we've talked about so far on our websites?
Nope, I don't see any in the chat currently.
Great. And Bernice, were you going to share something next?
That was my presentation. It looks like it's working through the website. If anybody wanted to add anything to chat, I'd be happy to navigate through the website live and look for anything else. But I think, the important thing is reach out to Language Access. Even if we can't help you, if it's not a language access issue, we're happy to point you in the right direction. Maybe I'm just going to be Patricia, but we can send you where you need to go. Not necessarily give you legal advice, but point you in the right direction as to who can help you. We also, maybe I'll mention something else for if there's other agencies, is that we do offer training for certification of interpreters. It is a rather rigorous process that's offered to through our program. So we have information where you can apply. And it's not limited to Spanish, it's any other language. We have within the judiciary, we have some employees who are certified in Thai, Mandarin. I think we were up to 5 different languages. So there is a need, and we're always looking for ways to ensure that the public does receive equal access to justice and the services they need.
Hey, Bernice.
Right. And Bernice, if I could just jump in. Yeah, I think we have a question, but I'll get to the question really quick. For those of you that are trying to understand, I think the judiciary is really unique. So what Bernice was talking about when we have our language access, I'm trying to think of what they're specialists, I think is what they're called with the courts. What we require is, you know, I speak Spanish, but that's just, we try to take it a step further. We allow our employees to take an entire course where they really understand and they're trained to make sure that they're proficient, because we want to make sure the information they're giving is accurate. If they go through that training program that Bernice talked about, and if your agencies are interested in that, you know, there's different programs, they're able to take a course where they really learn what that means to be really a good interpreter for individuals, and you get a certificate, you complete it. At the judiciary, if an employee goes through that process and gets certified, we actually pay our employees a little bit more per hour so that they're available. That's kind of like a benefit that I think the judiciary has thought is useful. And so we have that available. So when we have 5 different languages, you know, if there's a unique language, that employee, because they're getting paid $1 extra per hour, you know, they might get pinged and saying, hey, can you jump on this call with somebody that's in a different part of the state, so that we can try to get our people that we know are certified, that know our court system, to be able to assist, which I think is absolutely fabulous. And again, if you have an agency, or if you want to try to increase the professionalism or the proficiency of some of your folks that are bilingual, or maybe know more than one language, that's a great resource that you can consider, is getting into that training program so that you know that you're providing quality you know, services to people. We have a question, Bernice. I think I know the answer, but I'll ask it. We have a question: will there be bilingual forms for other languages such as Vietnamese or Chinese?
Yes, and so what happens when we offer these forms, as Patricia said, the Supreme Court enters orders. So what we're doing is we're always, you know, looking at statistics, what are the needs, and then we present this information to the Supreme Court. Once the Supreme Court enters an order allowing us to accept particular forms and languages other than English, we certainly distribute them. But you can, at any time, any document that you're submitting to the court, we go, especially the domestic violence, the domestic relations, we're looking at landlord-tenant, that's in the works right now, that you can submit them to the court and we get them translated for you. So it's really nice that we have them dual, right, in English and whatever the other language is, and so that it's right there for all parties. They have it in both languages right before them. So without making a whole lot of commitment with what's in the works, yes, there are other languages.
Right, and just so everyone, I think from the lawyer standpoint, when we're looking at what federal law requires us to do, if I'm not mistaken, Bernice, I think the federal threshold requirement is showing that greater than 5% of your population is in that language. And so what I can say, when I've looked at the most recent data, in New Mexico, the only language that fits that federal threshold of providing documentations or services, especially documents in other languages, is Spanish. But we do know that we have some, you know, Vietnamese, Chinese, Mandarin. I think in southeastern New Mexico, we have Arabic. You know, we have a lot of people that came from Afghanistan in our communities that then get placed throughout, you know, so we do have different clusters. I think down also in the 12th, which is Alamogordo, at the Air Force Base, there used to be some fighter individuals from Germany and other European countries. So we do get different questions for that. So just because we right now don't have that available, it's not that we don't want to, we're not required by law, but what we're doing is, as we've gotten the requirements of the Spanish stuff done, we are able to slowly expand and put that into our proposal process, which is what Bernice said. But the great question is, even though we don't have a domestic violence, and I think that's the most common, order protection or child custody form available in a bilingual format, we do know that we have enough services that individuals can submit it in different languages, especially for those, because we have so many people that don't have attorneys. And even though it may not be official and we don't have a form, if it's translated or submitted in a different language, our language access is able to translate that. And then what happens is we have the original submission in that language, and sometimes it has English and a different language. It's kind of, you know, both in there. Then we have it translated into a fully English one that comes attached. And so we do know that those are able to get forwarded to judges that same day. Our turnaround time, unless it's close to closing, but our turnaround time is phenomenal. They've said under an hour, and oftentimes, Bernice, I think what I've seen the data, sometimes it just takes 20 minutes or so. It depends how much is written in those things, but we're able to turn them around very, very, very quickly. So we're able to do that for anybody that comes into the court. So I just wanted to share that information with everybody that I think is really important. So even if we don't have it available, we can still do it. And the other thing, Bernice, and going back a step, I think we work for the judiciary so often we might forget, if individuals come to the court, what's really nice, and they speak a language, something that is very, very unusual, that is very unique. We do have a flip chart, the I speak flip chart, that our court clerks are able to look at, and they hand it to somebody, and most people probably see it, they flip through it, and they identify, when they point to it, it lets our court staff know what language it is. And then we're able to get somebody on the phone that is able to do that type of thing. So we have that available, I think, Bernice, that we didn't talk about. So I think that that's really nice as well. And I think I see another question that was typed in here. Hi, Melissa. I know Melissa. Melissa says, will the recently passed language access law, House Bill 22, impact the courts? Melissa, I don't recall. I don't think that's something that I looked at. Bernice, did you look at House Bill 22 this year?
I actually did, and actually our director, Artie Pepin, volunteered our language access services to assist the executive branch. So it impacted us in the fact that we're willing to assist the executive branch in putting together language access plans. That's another thing we didn't talk about, but each judicial district is required to have a language access plan that addresses how we address the needs of our LEP customers. So that includes, what services do we provide, making sure that we have equipment available, just our signage, making sure that people know we can do this. So yeah, so we're going to help the rest of the state with their language access programs.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I think somebody that told me about that early in the session, that's what I told them, because I think the executive branch, and there's 3 different branches of government. So the executive is like the the legislative branch is the legislature. They make our laws. The executive branch are all our state agencies like Department of Health, Tourism Department, all of that. And then the 3rd branch of government is the judicial. And so what happened is, it's ironic, Melissa, we've been doing it the judiciary forever, and it doesn't really apply to us because we set the standard. And so when I talked to some individuals, I said, I know the executive branch is complaining, but it's really not that hard. We've done it. We've done a fully immersive website. We have all these services available. So what's interesting, and I didn't know that, Bernice, is we are actually going to serve kind of as a mentor to that other branch of government, because we did it on our own. We've absorbed that, and we have found that it works because we want to make sure we have equal access to justice for everybody, all of our litigants, anybody that comes to the courthouse steps. So that was one of the questions. Teresa also says, addresses languages other than Spanish and English, such as Vietnamese, Chinese, etc., and other traditional indigenous languages. Yes. So all the services we have, Teresa, does take into account all of that information. And we do, whether it's at the court where we have the flip book so people can identify what language that is, even though we may not have an actual live person, we are able to access services. So when somebody comes to the court and needs assistance, we can get the language line in place. And then the other thing, and this is probably the most important thing for everybody, if you are helping somebody that speaks, especially one of these languages that is more unique to New Mexico, other than a native language or Spanish, what we would suggest is, as soon as possible, you have to notify the court so that we can make sure that we have an interpreter available for the court hearing. Because if somebody were to forget to ask for that service, what will likely happen, to walk you through that, is when you come in, let's say that there is a hearing today at 1 o'clock, you come to the court. Well, if nobody notified the court and put a request in, then we won't likely be able to get somebody, especially for some of those more unique languages. Spanish, it depends. We have different individuals throughout the state. We have different interpreters and translators available at certain court locations that work at different locations. It may be possible to accommodate that, but they might be in a criminal docket, somebody that speaks Spanish and isn't available. So the best thing to do is to plan ahead and to give the judiciary, the courts, as much notice as possible. Because if you do that, then we can make sure to schedule somebody to be available for those types of hearings And so this is all language access based, but I just wanted to share that information with everyone. The other thing is, and maybe Bernice, since we have some time, what I'd like to walk through, the other thing that we're seeing a lot more, I think, in the judiciary, when we talk about ADA, that's the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think that there's quite a bit of information on that, in particular related to domestic violence. If I'm not mistaken, Bernice, your division on Friday had an actual class. So we have a lot of different training programs, and Zoom has made it great for us. You know, we're able to deliver those trainings throughout the state very easily. But Friday's session, if I'm not mistaken, talked about TBIs, traumatic brain injuries. And I wasn't able to attend that session, but what made me really excited is, in particular, as they relate to domestic violence victims. So as all of us know, that's becoming an emerging thing. So what happens when you're repeatedly, strangled and the oxygen doesn't get to your brain, or you're repeatedly hit? Trying to understand what that person that comes to the court may present like. And then also, if somebody does have a traumatic brain injury, for those of you that help those individual victims, we have different unique services available through our language access services. So one's language access and one is access for like ADA of what that happens. So Bernice, I don't know if you were able to watch it, but can you kind of describe in some general terms some of those assistive devices that we have available in our court system for people that have, for example, a traumatic brain injury?
I didn't attend it either. But I guess what we're looking at is that we're really trying to train the court staff to recognize, when there's a need, because sometimes people can't request assistance because of what's going on with them. One of the assisted listening devices we have are almost like headphones or amplifiers, right? So they ask for that, we give them to them. We also have something called the Ubi Duo, and I'm going to date myself here, but when I was a kid, there was something called Battleship, a little game, right? And those two little things open back to back, and that's what this is, almost like two little computers with screens, and you type, and then the other person sees. And so we use that for hard of hearing, or like Patricia said, the limited English proficiency. There might be people who can't articulate very well, but they can type, and so we can assist them that way. And Peggy hasn't asked me to order anything else, but part of our ADA program is we just created it. I think maybe it's coming up on a year old. So we were just language access services, and now we're called diversity and inclusion. So I manage the language access side. Peggy manages the Title II ADA. But even that in train, if there's other agencies on the line right now, or businesses where you have your ADA for your employees, but then you have the Title II ADA, which deals with our customers and what we look at. So they're very distinct, and it's important to have somebody that is trained with the Title II. But I did, and that was just really important, the traumatic brain injury. I heard a lot of good comments about it, and I was in and out. I have to double book myself.
We also host the traumatic brain injury training here at the coalition. We hosted it last year, and hopefully we can host it again, but that is such an informational training to really understand survivors and support them, with what they've gone through. It's going through a traumatic experience definitely affects a lot of things. And so any way that we can continue supporting them. I do have a question, Patricia, with what you mentioned earlier and letting the courts know as soon as possible for the need of an interpreter. We know that at times there's emergency hearings that are like 3 to 5 days, and that the court schedules between 7, 10, or 14 days. Is that enough time for a survivor that does not speak English to obtain an interpreter to support them through the process in the court hearing?
Most of the time, Teresa, my answer is yes. This is the lawyer, but it depends. There have been a couple of occasions, and I know, Bernie's not talking for your division, but I know about it, that there has been a very non-traditional language request. And when we go through our contractor that provides that, there has been, on occasion, some difficulty in trying to find that. But what happens is, again, the first time somebody comes to the court, identifying that and saying, most of our forms, our DDs one says, do you need an interpreter? and you check that box just so that people know what happens in our case management system. That I kind of like is it puts a little flag on them. And so that flag is an indicator for all court staff, including judges, that this person has requested an interpreter. And so if for some reason they can't accommodate that, there is a possibility that that will have to get reset. But we all know having to reset something, even though it's urgent and we understand the nature of it, what would likely happen is that order of protection would continue until the reset hearing, because it's so important for people to be able to understand the proceedings and to fully participate. So even if there is a delay in that, I do know that the judges would likely extend that order of protection, even if it was going to expire. So, you know, I use the quote 10-day hearings. Something happened and they weren't able to do it. The judge can extend that emergency or the temporary ex parte order an additional time period, because when they reset it, they know that they need an interpreter. So that's what's really good about that. Bernice, would you like to add anything to that question?
And what we do is the minute we know it's a language of lesser diffusion, that's the term we use, is we're on it. You know, I have a team, we're reaching out to other states. You know, we have a whole network, and we use telephonic and video appearances. So we might not get an in-person interpreter, but certainly we'll have somebody telephonically or on video. So we work, you know, we're on the phone, we're on the email lake trying to get this taken care of. So the minute it's identified, we're on it.
And Bernice, I have a question for that. Now that we've done so many hearings, you know, the courts use Google Meet. I think what I thought was really fascinating, and I learned so much, of course, working in judiciary, but I wanted to explain to everybody how we're able to use an interpreter when there's a Google Meet going on, because I think this is me just guessing. I don't know if you're sitting out there thinking, okay, great, but I don't want the other person hearing what this victim is asking these questions about. How does that work? So can you describe how we've been able to utilize interpreters in our remote hearing settings, which I think is really great for people?
Yeah, so, well, we have two things going on. The judiciary likes to use Google Meet. It's very similar to Zoom. So links are sent out either virtual or by phone, and everybody logs in. When there's a need for an interpreter, we call it a dual architecture, where then we get the phone number of the LEP, the person needing the interpreter, and then the interpreter then has, so the interpreter will have the computer up, seeing what's going on in the courtroom, and then they get on the second channel, the dual channel on a phone with the LEP, so that their conversation is back and forth. We're actually in the process, we're the first court in the nation, we developed our own app, Clara Connect. So we have a whole Clara family in which Zoom can't do this, WebEx, no one else can do this, is that we actually can have the callers call in. Right now, if you're either on video or you're on the phone, you know, very few people have both, right? I mean, we do because we work for the courts, but usually if you have an LEP, they have a phone, right? So they hang up from the Google Meet number and they talk to the interpreter. We've created an app in which everybody is in the virtual courtroom interactive, and they're moved from bucket to bucket. So we unveiled this application that's still in the prototype stage to other states, and they want it. No other court has done this. So we're excited about that as we move forward. But there is it's called dual architecture, where we make sure that the interpreter and the person needing services are in communication, and it's muted to the rest of the people while, you know, that communication is happening, and then the interpreter unmutes him or herself and speaks to the court.
During that process, I'm so sorry, my son is calling me on Facebook. I don't know how it connected to the computer. I apologize about that. So just a follow-up question with the process that you mentioned about the interpreter services, where the survivor is, like, I guess, connected with the interpreter. So are they able to listen into what the judge is saying, and is the judge able to hear the survivor as well? Because that can also be very meaningful for the, you know, the judge to learn more and hear the survivor. And even though there might be a bit of a interpretation process there, but yeah, I think that that's really important to be able to hear the survivor.
So that's actually, so most of my career has been in court administration. So I've been in this new role about 8 or 9 months. So I came from the courts. And so that's the set of glasses I still have on when we're developing this. And that was really important because what we have right now with the dual architecture, unless the litigant has both a cell phone and a laptop going on at the same time, there's rather a disconnect when they disconnect from the virtual meeting to talk to the interpreter. So based on that, in my experience, I said, no, we need something that they don't leave the virtual courtroom. So that's what we did. And then so we're even testing about the ratio, right? Do we want to be completely muted, or do we want it like a 9-10 split? Because we do have, some judges that are bilingual, or we have some litigants who, well, we call them LEPs, right? Limited English proficiency. So just like in person in the courtroom, you hear what's going on, but you still have that interpretation. So I wanted to mimic the real life courtroom as much as possible in the virtual world. And so that was another force for us. And so what happened is we found out that most of the litigants were not appearing video like we are doing right now. They were choosing the option to call in. And so when the disconnect was happening, disconnect from the virtual courtroom and just talk to the interpreter, that's when we knew we needed to have the people who called in still actively participating in the virtual courtroom. And so no other platform could support that. So we basically took apart our coding, it was called the source code, and dismantled it and reprogrammed it and then built it back up. So that's coming hopefully soon. And we hope to pilot it in the Doñana Magistrate Court in Las Cruces, and then move on to the district courts. But unfortunately, at this time, there is, unless somebody has two devices, they're going to be mostly relying on the interpreter.
And that goes as well for like telephonic, right? Not just like video, but telephonic as well. There, it's like the same thing. So they'll
right,
just
right.
interpreter.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right.
And Bernice, I see there's another question here. I'll just read it. It says, thank you for the services you're offering and sharing the work in setting the standard for language access. Just to check and to clarify, for the notices of hearings and requests for motions, emergency hearings, and DV forms, would the clients, the self-represented litigants, see somebody caught on to SRLs, request through the website, ? Or would they contact the court for the language access and accommodation for the DV survivors, engage in the litigation process, and be able to have mailing of forms of the court interpretation and translation services and forms in the translated materials? So I think we have two questions. One is, are they getting the notice of hearings, like, are they getting things in the mail in a different language? And if not, Bernice, how would they request that?
So again, it depends. If they're identified early on in the process when the petition is filed, and the court staff is aware of that, I do have lots of requests, mostly from the first coming in, asking that notices of hearing be sent in the target language. So we do that. If the court's aware, we have everything translated and sent to them. And maybe one of the things I had taken out of my slide is that sometimes we interchange the words, but interpreting is verbal and translation is written. And so, so when I talk about translating, that's the written documentation. So yeah, so if the court's made aware of it, we certainly do that. If I think I did click on something, and maybe that's where the question came from on the request for an interpreter. It can be done in writing. It can be done verbally right there if the litigants are at the courthouse. Forms, I think it depends on the court and what they offer. Many times the courts just refer people to the website. Some courts have a more robust self-represented litigant program where the forms are available. We talked about our Clara Kiosk where you can go to Santa Fe and click. So I think it depends. Again, you can always reach out to me and I can email the links for the forms. And I think that's just really good for any agencies that assist to be able to navigate and obtain the forms themselves. But certainly we'd be able to assist you with that.
Right. And just to jump in, so the translation of forms, what I have seen is particularly Santa Fe is really leading, I think, our state in our efforts. Santa Fe, let's say that there's a DV case, you know, we have the bilingual forms, which is really nice, so they can read it, and some of our courts have sample languages, so if judges always say certain things, they can click and enter that themselves. So when the petitioner, the protected person leaves with the order, they can pretty much be able to tell what it says, and it may not be fully translated, but it's pretty close. At least it gives them an idea. And then let's say that they have a child custody case and they go to an evaluator or something. A lot of those materials that are happening, we are able, then the courts are making the request to have all of that translated, so that when the person comes to court, the same person, they're able to at least read what these reports say and be prepared, you know, for their court case. So we have a lot of different variables, and it truly depends, but we are trying to improve on that and making it as readily available as possible. Sometimes it does require a separate request, but we do feel relatively confident that going to the court, either in person, calling, or written and filing something, will trigger that. So it may not be automatic all the time, depending on where you're at. Santa Fe's pretty good, but if you live in a different part of the state and that's not happening, please feel free to reach out to the court. Go to court administration, go to the website, and if somebody is telling you we can't do that, and you still have questions because you're thinking that you saw us, please feel free to contact Bernice directly. Sometimes it is an educational part of it. You know, as much as we try to get information out and our court staff has to learn all this stuff, they may not be aware, or maybe that was something that wasn't done before, and now that they're not aware that we're doing it now. So please let us know, because it's always a great way to train people and make sure that everyone understands what that is. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I think that's a big thing. And really quickly, you know, Teresa, for a few more minutes, I think one of the questions I'm hearing a lot is what's happening with domestic violence order protection hearings? What is going on with that? I know that I've heard both things. Some people love that survivors or victims did not have to go to court in person. Some people hated it. So I think that's a lot of questions is, are you going to start seeing more hearings in person, and are people going to be required to? Right now, that's a possibility. I think it varies throughout the state because we have different court policies. So each district, each region that's, you know, district court has their own policies, and they have developed a lot of their own procedures. And so some courts, I think, are still doing some virtual hearings that some people love and some hate, and some are requiring you to be there. If there's any other reason why somebody can't appear or doesn't want to, that could be an accommodation request. So if you're dealing with somebody that really doesn't want to, maybe they, you know, just to throw this out, maybe they do feel intimidated, being there would not allow them to participate fully. There could be other possibilities going forward where you can make or help that person make an accommodation request, because it could be that they need a support person sitting with them. They need something that's written down. They need more support, and they don't want to appear in person because maybe there's PTSD or something going on. There's a lot of different variables. So there's no blanket policy yet as to whether we're going to go virtual, all virtual, in-person required, or hybrid. That's kind of a work in progress that's happening. But if one of those things is taken away, I would just like to throw out, you can make an accommodation request and ask, let's say that we go all in person and you're dealing with somebody that really doesn't want to. I would say go forth and put that request in writing and see if there could be an accommodation made. Because what's great is before COVID, a lot of our courts, we didn't have the technology. We just didn't have the ability. All of our judges now know how to hold virtual hearings. That's one good positive that we've come out of, right? So if that is a viable thing that could make it easier, go ahead and put that as a reasonable accommodation. And Bernice can talk about it. It's not like I want all my pleadings to be in purple sparkly ink. Is that a reasonable accommodation? Maybe, probably not. But if it's something like assistive devices or processing, I need to have a screen like Bernice talked about and see things in writing so that I can help understand. All of those are reasonable requests that we have availability for. So if there's something else that's new, you could put it in writing. We're always expanding. Bernice orders all sorts of really great resources and technology for our courts as we become more aware what those needs are. But I just wanted to share that with you. So we're really excited about, you know, what we're going to do, and just a couple of things for you all to keep in mind before we end our session today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And that's meaningful to hear. And before my son Zoom bombed, but it's just really important, right? Like, so for me, my first language was Spanish. And so I had to be my parents and my family's translator. And so for them, not, it's just not being in the room to hear what is happening or what, or to hear and feel the dynamic and the energy of that situation. It's hard for, I think, a survivor to not be a part of that conversation or kind of be out there on the side with the interpreter, because sometimes interpretation sometimes can be missed, right? Like, and then translating the emotions, there's a lot of emotions for survivors, and really advocating what happened to them. And like you mentioned earlier, if they have experienced like a traumatic brain injury, a traumatic scenario entirely, right, with domestic violence. And so just to be understanding with the survivor. But I'm happy to hear that you're able to, if they need an accommodation, that you're able to provide them support through the process and or any support that they need, right? And so it's nice to know that they can submit that and possibly be heard in that support or what they're requesting. So thank you for that.
Sure. And then one other thing I think that Bernice didn't mention that I love, and I know it's a pilot right now. I don't know if any of you have heard about scribing. So scribing is when somebody is not able, so as most of you know, our court clerks have specific rules that even if I had sprained my arm and broken the other one in a car accident, I came into the court and I was required to fill out an order of protection, or if I missed something, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the clerk saying, I can't fill that out, and they hand it to you because they're prohibited under our rules. But if somebody comes in and can't write, so that's an extreme thing, for whatever reason, or maybe they don't know how to write, they don't have that skill set. We are piloting a program through our different courts where we're able to scribe. And what that means is we have different personnel at the court where they take them to a different room and they sit down, and we have individuals that then would read the question. I'm just making this up, name, or in Spanish they say nombre, and the person would say it, and that person would scribe, would write down what is being said. And so that's another indication for people. You could be an English speaker and you might think they don't need any kind of services, but maybe they're illiterate or they just don't have the ability to write, or their writing is such a low level they don't feel comfortable. That would be it. Or if somebody had a stroke, and they literally can't use their right hand or something like that. So we have a new scribing project that we are piloting that we hope to roll out. Bernice, I don't know if you want to add anything more. You probably have more information on the scribing project.
It's still in the pilot phase, but the feedback we've gotten has been great. And so what happens is the court staff that is at the court that is piloting, they're trained as well, right? Because as court clerks, we're trained like you can't fill out forms. You can't tell them what forms to fill out. So they have to learn what it is to scribe without adding their own information or what they think should be said. So that, that's a really important distinction to make, that when it's scribing services, it truly is that, the court, because they're court employees, are not adding their own spin, for lack of a better word, to it. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make that reasonable accommodation that is necessary.
And where are our pilot locations for our scribing project, Bernice? Now that I threw out this great idea, not everybody can have it, but let us know where it is available.
We have it in the 9th, and then we have it in the 2nd. Those are the two, 2nd and the 9th. So.
Does everybody know? Why don't you tell me the 9th is what area of the state? And
so I have my little map here, right? So we have the 9th is Clovis. It's in Clovis, and then in Albuquerque in the 2nd. So those are the two.
Okay, so those are our two pilot locations, which is, Clovis and Albuquerque. So Clovis is great about being kind of our pilot project. They are also piloting, I know we're going off on stuff, they're piloting some of our eviction stuff. I don't know if any of you have seen that in the news. So Clovis has been a great court that wants to be on there. It's really nice because it's a good demographic. It's not one of our bigger courts, but they are doing that. And pilot, what that means is we're trying to work out the kinks and see what works. And I think, Bernice, most of our pilots that we've taken on, including the forms being accepted in a different language, I can tell you, when we talked about that many years ago, the meetings that Bernice and I were at, they were convinced that it was going to overwhelm the judiciary. We wouldn't be able to handle it, the cost. And you know what happened after we alleviated everyone's concerns? Once we got the pilots underway in different locations, right, throughout the state, we actually found, it cost us a little bit more, but it wasn't something that was so overwhelming, like this deluge, that we couldn't handle. And then the other thing is timeliness. and we've been able to work with some great contractors. So pilots just make us see what the data shows and see what the usage is. And then usually what happens is if it's something that's manageable, we're able to slowly roll that out. It takes a couple of years, but that's what we've been doing in New Mexico. And that's why we're, I think, ranked #1 in the country, because we're trying different things. And at least it's better than, oh no, that's too hard, we can't do it. Let's try it. Let's see. Let's find a court that's willing to pilot it. And then we put data together, and that's what we're going at. So just wanted to share all of that. I'm not sure if there's any other questions. I don't see any right now, but I know that's a lot of information, but hopefully you walk away today with what Bernice said, you know, your learning objectives. I hope that you all know a little bit more about what the judiciary does do and the huge amount of services that we have available, both for language and for accessibility, for ADA, for other reasons. So anything else, Bernice, you wanted to add?
No, I just want to thank you all for inviting us. And, you know, I will, Teresa, I can share the PowerPoint with you. There's our contact information. Feel free to, you know, ask us any questions. And yeah, we're excited to continue our pilots and see how, you know, what other services we can offer, so that we can keep our cases moving along, and people can get the services they deserve.
Thank you so much for the both of you being here with us this morning and now going on into the afternoon. This session was absolutely informative. And we're grateful to have the experts come in and let us know what is happening and all the amazing things that are happening and advancing, right, to really support language access. And not only survivors, but anybody, right, that goes into the court system. So thank you for all of your efforts and your work. Again, like I mentioned, I really look forward to connecting with you both and maybe having this in Spanish and facilitating it again. And even maybe having it every 6 months to every year to just see what's happening and maybe have some updates and reshare this information, because this is really, really important to our community. And thank you all for joining us on the webinar. As always, you will get an email from me, possibly tomorrow, just so I can work on the recording. You can always head to our YouTube channel where you can watch our past advocacy cafes or any other training that we may have had live on Facebook. You are welcome to rewatch it if you missed it, but let me just work on that recording. I'll send you an email with a survey. Please let us know how this was, and if you still have any questions. I will also place Bernice and Patricia's information in the email if in any case, if you need anything from them or have any more questions. But once you fill out that survey, you will automatically get your certificate, so make sure to place your email correctly in that survey. Otherwise, it might not get to you. But in the meantime, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and our website. And then also, I will also include the listserv for our trainings, just in case if anybody's not on that training listserv for any future trainings. But I'll send that email out to you all. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Bernice and Patricia, again for being here with us. And I hope you all have a good lunch. Bye. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.